Alright, so I wasted about 3 minutes of film time trying to get this to focus. This seems to be the magical angle, so I'm going to run with it. It's Friday night, just got home from work. I can see this really well because sunlight's coming through the crack shop door, which is fantastic. So what I'm going to try to do is walk you through this, okay? You've seen the bolts that go from the front of the block through the transmission. Those are going to be right in line with our inspection cover on both sides. I'm thinking there's just two. Obviously, they're going to be the lowest most point. Right here, the black tube, I'm going to pray that my finger doesn't direct away from where I want you to be. This thing here that snakes up that direction, that is the transmission dipstick tube. Reference it. Start right about here and go forward. Do you see the black thing here underneath the tube? That is our first bell housing bolt, right? That's going to go through the transmission. We're facing the back of the block, the front of the truck. However you need to orient yourself. We're on the passenger side, and it's got blurry. That is a shame. Anyway, let's pray that this works. Okay. It's just, you're gonna have to just roll with me here, okay? The black thing below the tube is a bolt from the back of the transmission into the back of the block. The thing that you see that's silver and shiny, good lord, this is ridiculous. That thing right there is a freeze plug in our cylinder head. The thing that you want to make note of that I was unaware of, that black cable that you see running in front of the freeze plug, almost in line with the bolt we want to remove from the transmission, that is a ground stud. That's going probably from our PCM or firewall area right to the block on the cylinder head. That's great. We want good grounds. That would be a really bad thing to discover when you're trying to pull the engine out. I assume that's what most people do. If that does go to a PCM, that would be mega bad news. So, as you can see, this is why we don't film much. And again, this is even just awkward for me to hold the camera at this angle. That's what you need to know on the passenger side. The other bolt is going to be up towards the top. I'm going to try now to get you, I realize this is all blurry. You hopefully saw what I told you to. I'm going to slide over to the driver's side, try to showcase the same thing there. It's a little more difficult here. What's screwing up our camera is right here. That's the Y pipe that goes to the cat. On the driver's side, you think, hey, you don't have to worry about the exhaust. Well, that's because there's a drive shaft there. That's equally bad, but I'm going to try to at least show you this so you'll know what I'm referencing when we pull it out. Alright, it's just really not going to happen. I can't spend all my time trying to get this to focus so you can understand what I'm talking about as much as I'd love to. But this is, of course, the driver's side. This is going to be the Y pipe that runs up to your exhaust manifold, right? The golden looking bolt. At some points in time, maybe you can see it. That's another ground, all right? It's on the cylinder head just like the previous one was. You can kind of see that blue masking tape that says Coil. It's off to the side. I know it's not focused. I'm, like I said, on my back on a creeper with a huge camera, so this is the best we can do, really. But there's going to be another bolt. I honestly can't even see it through all of this. You know, you're basically your kick down and, you know, cooler lines and all that mess of aluminum looking goodness there. So I'm not too worried about that because I honestly can't see that bolt. I assume it's somewhere in there. And then, like I said, there should be two up towards the top, and I can't see those at all either. So I'm not shorting you much here, but this is kind of what you would be dealing with. I'm going to hopefully be able to access those from the top, kind of where we remove the manifold, at least the top two bolts. And again, I have no clue where this one even is, so I'll just kind of, it's going to be symmetrical as your going point. If you find it on the passenger side, try to draw a straight line bisecting the transmission, and you should have one on the driver's side. So that's my best advice. That's what I'm going to use, and I'm going to start getting on that. Alright, so back to my usual perch. I got in here without the camera and kind of didn't feel like getting it, but I didn't want to get too far ahead. I just ran the shop vac, which quite the reach to turn that on and off, but somehow we didn't face plant when we went to kill the power. So what I've done, I've got some stuff I need to get out of the way. I'm just trying to get back there and see if we can feel out where the bolts are through the transmission. And there was a crud ton of dirt and debris and grease and gunk all over the valve cover rails where you would have both harnesses. You'll note This side looks a lot cleaner than that one, and by clean I mean there's no convoluted tubing. That's because it is all right here. This mess of wires and blue tape that you see kind of floating in the breeze traces up to this point right here. That's where the passenger side of the manifold electrical connectors all go. They all terminate. The only hold up now kind of keeping it in its place, oh, it came through. Coil wire. Fantastic. I was going to pull that off specifically to get the coil wire out, but the coil wire I guess snaked out when I wasn't paying attention, so that's good news there. Coming this way though, I just ran the shop vac again along the rails. You can see this white strip. That's a number 4. That would have been the fuel injector harness numbering. Again, so the factory does that. You don't have to feel bad for doing so. What I want to note though is on this harness, before we get too far ahead, if I were to slide it back into place, you'll see this tab here where my traffic finger is, and you'll see another one right down there ahead of the green tag. So those were going to be right here on the second bolt. If we come in, you know, just going front to back, we're going to call that 2. And then of course you see a bolt there, and you see the stud here. So stud 4 also had that. On the driver's side, it mimics the same thing. The stud here, your second fastener on the top, that had it. And then when you see the 4th one there, you'd think, okay, so there was a clip on it, right? No, there was not. Let me grab the light here for you. I gotta say, this little Braun, I really like the adjustable head, and you're blind now just like me. But no clip there. It's the 5th one where all that grease and gunk is. You can't even see it, nor can I, but I know it's there because otherwise this would come free. It looks like we have a ground going to the valve cover stud right there. There very well could be one here. Something I wanted to highlight though, before I start getting too far ahead, we've got some interesting developments here. This thing, again, had nothing on it, but watch this. I can turn that by hand, okay? Again, this valve cover has never been off, and I can only assume that we must have had just a little bit of seepage out of that. You know, nothing major, nothing to the point that, you know, you have like oil puddles under your truck, but just maybe slight oil down on the cylinder head or that cavity back there. And of course, you get a little oil on something, dirt sticks to it. Where I live, there's tons of dirt. That's why it looks like a desert in the valley rails. This one, and the way you get these clips off right here, you just literally pry at them with a screwdriver and just kind of work your way up. There's nothing fancy to them. This one I thought I could pry up, but you'll note it's also freewheeling on the stud. And obviously I can't just unthread it because we hit the valve cover. That's not an immovable object, right? So I thought, well, it must be press fit. Again, I'm trying to not break these. I'm not sure that I'm going to reuse them. I might. If I break them, I don't have that option. So I'm going to figure something out on that front, but that's an issue. The ones with the hose clamps, I can't see that one, but like this one here that kind of had like the heater hose run through it, I think it's for sure press fit. And then that one that has all the wires, I don't even know. We're going to have to get to it when we can. Coming in here though, where do we want to go? I'm trying to just work my way so I have clean line of sight. I had no plans to pull the distributor. I very well may do that now. I don't know that it would, you probably could leave it in place, or at least, especially if you took the cap off. But again, it kind of depends what you're doing. If you're replacing the motor, there's really no reason to leave anything. But I was just kind of, you know, trying to leave it intact as best I could. There's a chance if I get ticked off enough, we may pull the cylinder heads before we pull this thing. So needless to say, that's where we stand. This convoluted tubing there that makes the L and then bends back again, that goes to the throttle body. I'm about to start disconnecting that stuff. It's just kind of a pain. It constantly falls down and knocks the rags into the valley plate. But what I'm gonna do is pray my cell phone doesn't drop off of the edge of the truck there. And whoa, the Cowboys just got Trayvon Diggs. That's right, it is round 2 of the draft. I guess maybe they're going by BPA, best player available. Anyway, sorry for that, but we're gonna come in and just continue plugging away here and see what we can get to. So all right, that was the other thing I forgot. Luckily I remembered before we sat the camera down. You can't see it now, but there was a bolt and washer combo here, and it held this in place like so. So again, this is kind of our combination deal that runs back over to the battery tray area. So this is a ground, and then right here, this is the ground that ties in with this fuel rail. So all your harness for your fuel injectors on the driver's side, your 1, 3, 5, and 7, your throttle position sensors, all that stuff, it has a front ground right here at this power steering mount. I think that's it. I'm going to pry that out, get it out of the way, and just take it from there. Alright, so a couple of things. Number one, way back in there, you can see our 2 connections for the heater hose. We got this one kind of angles off towards the driver's side, and then this crimp kind of angles off towards the passenger side fender. I'm just going to go ahead and get those out of my way. They're just constantly always dangling, snaking somewhere, just making life kind of inconvenient. And then right up here, I've gone ahead and I've kind of broke this free. Just worked out well that I'd leave the coil bracket. I guess this one actually went through on the bottom again. I can't see that, so I didn't even know. But what I can tell you is that that's an interesting design. So let's see. It would have to be the same way too. So the way to think of this assembly happening is the tensioner pulley, which I've just left in place, and when it goes on to its bracket, it would go right up against the cylinder head. Then you're going to want to slide on the coil bracket, and then there is a washer right there. I don't know that you can see it. I'll take my word for it. This little piece I'm articulating is a washer. We've got a washer there. This bolt on the bottom also had a washer. So from the front, you're going to have bolt, washer, coil bracket where applicable, which will be this bolt here and the one on the bottom, and then this one right here has nothing to do with said coil bracket. So I believe that's all. Again, we'll actually swing this up. You can see the Phillips connections there. Again, that's kind of a pain to get to. You can't see what you're doing. So I just decided to go this direction with it. But just slowly clearing stuff out so we'll have space to work on what's important in this segment of the video, which was just trying to disconnect the transmission. So that's what the end goal is here. I'm going to continue working towards it. Alright, it turns out this was press fit. I don't know that I can get this off. The pliers aren't locking, obviously, but clutch. Right here. Oh, come on, buddy. There we go. So that is press fit, be danged. It certainly felt threaded, but I guess not. But again, that right there is super loose, just like this one. This one had nothing on it. That's what's crazy. Like the second stud had the wiring harness at least. So I've got kind of a mess of parts we've been removing here. We've got pliers on the ground, but right there, you can kind of see if we drop down into that crevice. You can't really tell, but it's, yeah, now you can. Right around where the dipstick disappears, there is a whole lot of oily residue there. And I'm guessing, you know, that could have been multiple things really, but a logical place to look would be the seepage from maybe the valve cover gasket. Who knows, but we're making headway. That's what's important. But can confirm that was in fact press fit. I was thinking that one must have been threaded and just the bigger ones were press fit. But now that we know that, we'll just go ahead and we will not hesitate to pry and lift up on absolutely everything back here. Alright, so my apologies, the Braun has died. That thing doesn't have very good battery life, but when it's bright, and it's actually pretty impressive. That said, the Astro definitely kills it in terms of battery. Now, coming in, what I've done here, just, again, trying to constantly free up space. The heater hoses are gone, so that's nice. Simple, you know, just pull off your constant tension clamp. This thing right here, I could not figure it out for the life of me. I think you can see it decently. And with the hose gone, it just slips right off. With the hose on, that was not going to happen, but I've just placed it there for the time being. And what I'm doing now is just pulling the plug wires so I can basically get in and try to remove those connectors. That one right there, I'm having a nightmare of a time with. Again, I am trying to keep these intact. I don't know if I'll reuse them, but if I break them, we can't. So again, that's where they stand. Basically, your back bolt on the down exhaust manifold side of the passenger valve cover and 4 have one, as did 3 and as did your first one. So there's studs basically on 1, 3, 4, and 5. 1, 3, 4, and 5 have the clips. I've got those tagged. I've actually sat them down out there where you see the blue. Just, I don't know where the other one is, somewhere over there. Got all kinds of loose parts and stuff I'm trying not to knock over. Still haven't picked my pliers up, but pulling the plugs out, pretty self-explanatory. Some of them I had labeled already, just black Sharpie again. They tuck in inside the heat shields, if you will, that you can see there. So it's not a huge deal. If you want to label them up higher, you can do so. If you want to tape them, you can go that route. I'm just kind of the ones that weren't labeled. You can kind of see my 8 I scribbled on there. That's going to stay intact. I'm not going to do anything stupid with them. And again, just clearing everything out so we can actually have better access to all of this that we're trying to accomplish. So realistically, had I have known this, we would have tackled it ahead of time in a previous segment. So I thought that we could just easily get back there, have a lot of space, be able to get to the bolts we need to, and we're kind of running into this. So that's why it's in this part. My apologies there, but it is what it is. We will continue on. All right, so still in here, still trying to get those spark plug wire holders off. The more I mess with them, the more I'm thinking we're not going back with them. We're going to find something different, something better. That said, for anyone that needs to see this, essentially your firing order on the Magnum V8 is going to be 18436572 as is standard. Your center wire we've disconnected long ago from its original source, that will always be your coil, okay, on these setups. And then the rotation is going to match the firing order, so it's going to be 18436572. Now I just started, this was the easiest one to get to, so it's what I pulled off first. As fate would have it, it was number 2, right? And so you can mark whichever end you want to, you can tag them. I want to say I did these with silver Sharpie way back when. Clearly that has not translated well with the dust, but since this was 2, right, we either know that this is going to be 7 or it's going to be 1. When you pull it off, if it comes off real short, it's going to be your number 7. If it's long and comes all the way over here, it would be your number 1. As it pans out, that was 7, so 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5. That would mean this would be 5. It was. So as we start to dissect it, we can go in that order. You can leave one of these on if you want to denote it. I'm not quite sure how far we're going to go, but I'm just getting them out of here because, as you can see, just the wire harness routing, the fuel line, there's another clip right here we need to get done. I'm thinking when we come in, that rusted looking piece is the distributor hold down clamp, just like on an old car. So we're going to pull that. Hopefully then we can kind of get that sensor out without damaging it. We can get all the way back in there, just line everything up like we need it to so we can have access to those bolts. But I had no idea this was this dirty. That connection broke on the wiring harness, which is unfortunate. And then these, a couple of them fly off and leave a silver tube, which you can kind of see right there. The back ones both I'm having a lot of trouble with. That's basically all that's left on the passenger side. Spoiler alert, everything that's in my way, the biggest problem I have is this engine oil dipstick. Anytime I lean forward, it just hits and it digs right into my ribs. So if you're super tall or super short, it may not be an issue. If you're short enough, it'll put your eye out. So for me, it's just right in the ribs, and I hate that. But this is kind of still what I'm doing here, just kind of prep work to get to the fun stuff of trying to get to those bolts. So anyway, I'm going to continue on, but I just wanted to kind of highlight that while we had easy access to it. There should be, and we can't really see it well here, but if I remember correctly, on the factory distributor cap, there's going to be a number 1 either in line with this port or on the side, which again we just don't have good access to. If I remember, I'll show you at a later date and time. But typically when you buy like a tune-up kit, you're also going to have the number 1 labeled. That way if you replace your cap and rotor, you can go to town in that manner. But I'm going to continue on here, try to knock out some more before I call it a night, and I will catch you back for the next update. Alright, so we're finally progressing a little bit here. These stupid ones at the very back end of the valve cover, the passenger side way cleaner than the driver side, so it's what I'm going to show you. But essentially what I finally did, I couldn't get it to lift, I couldn't pry between it, it's just too far back at a weird angle, couldn't get anything to catch. Finally I just started doing that side to side, violently back and forth, and eventually you start to make headway. At that point in time, you can either choose to continue to shimmy it, or you can just rip right up, or you can go to prying with a screwdriver. Personal preference, whatever you prefer. The sensor back here, if we can get in there, you can kind of see the red clip here. I've pushed it through, so we're coming from the distributor over to the passenger side. That allows us to press right there. We can lift that off. I've just got it kind of in place for now. Let's see, where are we at? constantly been rerouting wires here, trying to get them out of my way. And this right here, if I lift that vacuum line up, you can sort of see the stud with the nut on it. That's going to be a 1/2-inch socket that we're going to need. That is the top back of the passenger valve cover, okay? And what that is, that's one of 3 grounds in this immediate area. And that one is going to be what I refer to as the second one or the middle one. So if you are good with tracing wires, you'll see that we're coming from that with the hand I'm moving. And so it's right here. It may actually be the last one in terms of that point, right? But this is our connection point. That's just right there on the cowl, sort of above your transmission dipstick. The first one, as I'm going to call it, reading left to right, goes right there to the ECU, okay? So from this point to this point. The second one, and again, it may actually be the one right up against the firewall, but regardless, all 3 of them are off of that one bolt. This one goes to the valve cover. This one that we can see here that I'm kind of pulling on for you, number 3 as I will refer to it, it is actually second in line here. Again, that's kind of irrelevant, but if you need to know, it would be the bolt. The first one you would place on the bolt, it would be the ECU. Second would be this one, which goes to the block. This is what we saw a little bit ago when we were under the vehicle. And then the one right up against the firewall goes to the valve cover here. So that's technically probably not important, but if you want to replicate what the factory did, if you're restoring this someday, this is an OE untouched truck. That's how they did it. That's how you can do it, or how you can nitpick someone that didn't and potentially take the win. So, again, thinking ahead here. You only would do this with old cars. This sensor here, I have no freaking clue. I can't even tell you what that would go to, but it'll just be a simple deal where we just kind of press down and pull apart. And at this point, I think I'm ready to put the camera down. I'm gonna have to get a deep socket to take that off, and then I might reach in. I've debated just ripping this out. If this is like a 360 or a 440, it would just be an O-ring that holds this dipstick in place. And the problem is you can't really see it, but there's just so much like sludge and debris there. I don't want to pull this out and have some drop in. So we're gonna leave it for now and just constantly be poked in the ribs. But anyway, we've made a little headway here. We're making progress. That's the main thing. I'm gonna get back to work, and I will catch you for the next progress point. Alright, it's a little overkill just for my own documentation and to maybe help people out in the future. Here we go. This is the passenger side. When I say outboard of the valve cover, I'm talking about the side that would be closest to the fender, your tire, whatever you want to call it. Inboard would be right up against the intake manifold. From the front of the truck to the firewall, the closest to the truck we're going to call 1 at the front. And then we're going to go in all the way towards the back. At the firewall, we're going to call 5. So we're going front to back, 1 through 5, on the outboard side of the passenger valve cover. Stud located in slot number 1. It's going to have this little 1-piece clip, okay? All that does, that holds 1 wire, presumably your number 2. Number 2 position is just a bolt. There's no stud. There's nothing to worry about. Third position, this one is unique. It's going to have slots for 3 spark plug wires, but you note it's totally different than everything else, and that's because this clip area here is designed to hold your heater hose. Alright, coming in over here, we're going to have number 4 position, another stud. This is a 3 spark plug wire holder. And then over here, we're going to have the same thing. We've got stud on the very back, right up against the firewall. It'll once again hold 2 or 3 spark plug wires, depending on how you structure it. So you don't have to use them. You don't have to go back with these. This is what you had. I will say, all of these are press fit. You can pry them off. This one is a little bit unique. There's a metal insert in there. This plastic piece may separate. You can easily reassemble it. But that's what we have on the passenger side. Alright, so here we are back at it. You can see we've got the oil pressure sensor. Again, red clip towards the passenger side. We can slide it off. The problem is, when we're pulling an engine, that's going to decrease our clearance to the firewall. If you leave the distributor, it should take the brunt of the hit, but if this swings, you've got like the heater hose connections, the dipstick, there's all kinds of stuff that could hit and break. If avoidable, you would like to ensure that doesn't happen. So, issue I run into that many of you do, this is kind of why I've been reviewing wrenches, trying to pick my favorite brand. This is the biggest wrench I've got, 7/8. A couple of different brands, that's as big as I go here at the house. It's just not going to fit that sensor. So that's where something like this comes in really handy. A lot of people, you'd go to, like vice grips or channel locks or something crazy. It's going to chew up that connection. Again, that's a precision measuring instrument. We don't want to do that. And so what I have here is the pliers wrench. Elected to go with the Knipex one. Use the Ghidorah quite a bit. But this will allow us to have all the way. You can see it's scaled out there. 52 millimeters, and if you flip it over, we've got Imperial or SAE up to 2-inch. So I'm going to use this to spin that free. Then I think I'm going to start disconnecting the grounds. Again, it's kind of hard for me to keep tabs on what we filmed and haven't filmed. I've been cleaning up, bagging and tagging some bolts. I wish I would have done a better job of that. I always preach it, and then I kind of leave stuff sitting around, and then you kind of forget what it was when you thought you wouldn't. So that's the problem there. But we've got, like I said, all those grounds kind of running off this. I'm pretty sure we filmed that part. And then we've got one here, and I was just under the truck. I'm thinking this probably goes to the back of the cylinder head on this side. So I'm going to be working towards that stuff, and we will see how it goes. Alright, so having a really hard time finding anything that will actually fit that sensor with the distributor and valve covers in place. Now, what I'm zooming in on there is something you don't see well. So we're going to do our little hand trick. And you still don't see it well, but it's a 1/2-inch wrench is what I used, and we just broke that nut free. Again, that's not going to be what secures the valve cover. That's actually going to be the one that just secures the ground. We're going to go ahead, disconnect that, and proceed on. Alright, so if you see the handle right there that says Capri, that's our 3/8 breaker bar. I've got it on the back, I believe, of the cylinder head. Really hard to tell from in here. But, unless there's something I couldn't see from down there. You can see my socket. That's going to be the chrome shiny thing right there. You can see the back of the breaker bar. So it does look to be the cylinder head. Again, it's very, very difficult to tell when you can't see directly what you're looking at. That would be another one of these grounds. Again, I've got this one labeled. This one clearly right here is running back to that cylinder head location. So I'm going to try to break that free. The good news is that spun free super easy, zero issues with it. And we're going to again come over. I can only assume that this ground runs to the same location on the driver's side cylinder head. So we're going to pull that off as well. Hopefully it spins free just as easy, and we will have some grounds disconnected so we don't damage them as we proceed. Alright, while I'm thinking about it, I want to kind of document these connectors. Again, red safety switch, going to tuck into our oil pressure sending unit. Right over here where there's this funky old looking gray one with a gray clip on the connection side. 3 wires, I believe they're going to run to our distributor. And then right here, this harness that we've just gotten access to here recently that you wouldn't even know is there if you had your intake manifold on. Going to be simple to disconnect, but what it's going to do, it looks like there's convoluted tubing running down right here behind the distributor, disappears. Thinking that must be where our crank position sensor is located, because it ain't at the front of the block. So needless to say, all the stuff, you got to keep in mind I'm old school, and so when people retrofit or add in crank position sensors, usually up front, off of the trigger. But I guess factory stuff, they got it in the back of the block. Whatever works, that's fine by me. I could see how that could be a serious pain in the butt, though. If that sensor ever went out, you'd have to do quite a bit of finagling just to get to it. So I'm going to try my best. These are very difficult to access and label. There's not much pull with them, but I'm going to try to do that. I'm also possibly going to move that flex line, which is the fuel right here, and see if we can then maybe get this harness out of our way. It's kind of been my issue, aside from the dipstick, which still every time I lean in pokes me in the ribs. So that's just something I wanted to cover, again, for documentation purposes. It's so dirty and I can't really reach any of this well, but that's like I think it's gray with an orange tracer. You see the orange really well. And then the next one looks like it's black with a blue tracer that would go to our oil pressure sending unit. The distributor, it's going to be like 3 packed wires, you know what I mean, like side by side flat, almost like a speaker wire. Maybe it's just 2. It's 2. It's 3. I don't know. Anyway, it's going to be that stuff. You know what I'm talking about, where it's like the wire side by side, just like a speaker wire. And then here on the connector side, I'm gonna go with purple with a white stripe. Keep in mind, if these are dirty and dusty, it could vary the color of the middle. Almost looks like a straight black or a dark color. And then the outboard one there is going to be kind of a yellowy orange. So going by the connector numbers, I believe it's 1, 2, 3. We would have orange, black, and then purple with the white tracer in the 3 slot. What I'm presuming is the crank position sensor. God, that dipstick. I'm absolutely sick of that thing. We can't really, okay. Right there, what I'm just gonna call 1, 2, 3 from the bottom up. Purple with a white tracer. Almost looks black, and then that's like gray with a black tracer at the top side. Coming out, the bottom connection would be red. The middle, we're just gonna call that black, and the top, it looks kind of blue, but it's green in real life. So case in point, just for our reference, gray with the black tracer is gonna pair with the green. The middle, whatever 2 colors those are, go together. And then this bottom side, red on the outlets, and then the inlet here, purple with the white tracer. Again, hopefully that helps you out. It makes sense to me. That's what I'm the most concerned with. So I'm gonna start disconnecting those, attempt to label them, and I can finally then maybe debate about leaving the distributor, pulling it, and get access to some of these bell housing bolts. Alright, so right here we're going to go ahead. I think I'm just going to remove the power steering pump. I can drain it later if I'd like to. I'm thinking I can hang it down over here in that cavity. But essentially the very top one is just a stud. If you recall, that's where we had a couple of wires ground out. I've got the crown nut over on the front bumper actually. And then coming down below that, we've got a bolt. All these will be 9/16 sockets that you need. As best I can tell, number 3 down there is going to run through. And then we've got this one right here kind of hidden. And it looks like most of those are going to be like what we had over here on the driver's side. They're going to run through, terminate into the head. I'm thinking that'll just make my life a little easier, maybe reach around. I've spent a lot of time back there. And if I either cannot see it or the crank position sensor like ducks into the tranny, through like a grommet type of a thing, so not really sure how to proceed there in terms of protecting it. But I may also, I grabbed a 1/2-inch wrench I think before I climb back in here, and I think I'm just gonna go ahead and pull the distributor. Number 1, that'll keep us from ramming it into the firewall when we jack this up. It'll also, I mean, that's a pretty good chunk of height right there, you know, in terms of possibly having to do crazy stuff up front. I'm sitting on the core support. I still have it in place. Plan to move it, but the problem is, you know, there's like the condenser, and then there's also the transmission cooler, which turned out to be ginormous. That was something I had no clue, because it's been sandwiched between the condenser and the radiator all these years. So we might have to move that stuff. Not 100% sure yet, but I know getting the distributor will make it a little bit easier to clear everything. So I guess we'll go ahead and go that route. Similarly, let's see, that'll give me access to easier turn the oil pressure sending unit, which again, if we can salvage that, we don't have to buy a new sensor. I'm assuming the body there is plastic, so there's a good chance if we, you know, ram it into the firewall, or if it swings a little bit while we readjust, yeah, we could break it. Keep in mind, I'm working solo. I don't have anyone like steady the load while I crawl back underneath, or, you know, someone underneath while I'm, you know, tilting the engine type of thing. So any precaution you can take as a standalone individual is going to usually benefit you in the long run. So after that, we'll have real good access to the back bolts. Can finally see a couple of them. I'm thinking there's 4 from the transmission to the engine, and then we've got 2 at the very bottom, kind of from the engine to the transmission, if that makes any sense. Side to side, you know, item to item type of a profile. So I'm going to get the power steering out of the way. Again, I've pre-loosened everything. Make note that each one of these does have a washer, including the stud, and then of course the bolts that run through have them as well. But with that said, I'm gonna try to crank that out, and we will hopefully be able to proceed here. Alright, so I've currently got the power steering pump just kind of sitting off to the side, a little heavier than I thought it would be. Again, draining the fluid will make a huge difference. We very well might disconnect that at some point in time. I kind of think we can articulate everything out of the way. It's just the biggest issue is, for whatever reason, the factory kind of wrapped lines around other lines that really have no relation to power steering. So sitting there out of my way for the time being. Now right here, I want you to look at that gold bracket. That thing we can get off. That's sort of almost in line with where you think a timing pointer would be. But what it does, if you pay attention to it, it ducks down and it's holding the transcooler lines. And the best way, in my opinion, to probably get rid of that is just to simply get the bracket off of those studs, swing it down. I think we'll be able to do that when we tackle this one. It looks to be, I really can't back up to see it, but that's either like one of the flattest bolts ever or it's pressed in. I can't tell, you kind of see where my thumb is. But what we can have access to, this underneath is a bolt of some sort, like really small, maybe 3/8, 7/16 head, maybe even smaller. I'm gonna try to get that out of the way, and then we ultimately just need the lines disconnected from the block before we really start cranking down and proceeding. We have really good access now to this motor mount nuts. The bolt, again, on the driver's side would thread through from the tailgate side of the vehicle. Coming to this side, can't really see it, but we have decent access to the passenger side. The thing that looks different is that is the bolt head, and then the thread and the nut is going to be towards the tailgate on this passenger side of the vehicle. So we've got pretty good access. In fact, I mean, looking down there, you can see the engine to transmission bolt. I'm thinking those may be the two that I pull last. I don't know, if this was on a lift, it would be a lot easier and safer. Because what you have to think about is if you save those for last, you're under the vehicle. Of course, by that point in time, we would have our hoist attached to the valley plate area or something. But if we do those first, so we don't have to do that, we'd have to support the transmission, and then we'd kind of have to be in here with the hoist and the level arm as we're trying to then move the top bolts from the transmission to the block. I don't really know. The cab forward design is really the problem, because in an old car, I mean, your engine would just be plucked straight up. You'd have no issues. I mean, you can see right here where the light is. I mean, all that of the engine, like 3/5 of it is behind the cowl. So anyway, I'll figure all that out as we get to it. Again, the heat shields, I'm pretty sure, just pinned in. Kind of the bolt runs through the motor mount, through the shield into the block. So those are kind of going to stay. Again, I haven't messed with spool mounts before, so this will be a learning curve there as well. But surprisingly, that's sitting there pretty good. I was afraid it would fall. Seems like it's safe. So I've got my hooks and some wire and everything if I need to tie it off. But for now, I'm going to work on the lines and then probably just break the distributor out of there and get that oil pressure sending unit. Alright, so just so you can kind of understand the logic here, the transmission dipstick here has got a bracket that bolts to the back of the transmission. The bolt runs through the dipstick tube, through the transmission, into the engine block. That is where you see the red handle. Equidistant, kind of right here in the same spot behind the intake manifold ports on your head, you're going to have the top bolt on the driver's side. Broke both of those free with a 3/8 breaker bar. I'm using a short socket. If I had a deep socket, we would be offset so much we would be into the firewall, couldn't get a good angle on it. I'd recommend 12-point sockets in this case. If you've got them, you just have a little bit more fine-tunability there. If not, 6 points fine, but you're going to need a short socket if you're going to go about doing it in this manner. And in my opinion, this seems to be the route to go. So I'm going to continue on making progress, and we'll be back.